Okay, so this chapter is what Katie was just talking about, is all about itemized deductions. So several of the questions she was just talking about, we're going to talk about in here, which is why I said let's just get going, because they're going to fall under here. So these are deductions and losses and certain itemized deductions. Last week we talked about some itemized deductions and other deductions that kind of fell before AGI. So most of what we're going to talk about today are from AGI, but there'll be a couple that actually do before AGI. So the big picture, these two people are looking at wanting to buy a house. They've been paying $2,000 a month in rent. They're willing to pay $2,500 for a mortgage on an after-tax basis. So basically what they're looking at is the fact that if their principal payment is $2,000, they know that they're going to have interest and they know they're going to have real estate taxes. So when they add that all up and divide it by 12, they're looking at $3,500, or more like $3,600. So that $3,600 is well above their $2,500 that they were looking at a payment. So that also kind of gives you an idea of how much extra you're paying on top of your mortgage payment that goes to taxes and interest. And at the beginning of your mortgage, the majority of your payment is actually interest. Other things that they got going on that they thought about, could they use their retirement and taxable investments to secure financing? So basically, if they did, could they lower their interest rate? Well, they could lower their interest charges by $2,000. Their federal AGI is around $200,000, so their taxable income would then come down to $160,000 to $176,000. Right now, they do not itemize. So currently, they do not itemize. And we can assume their marginal income tax rate is about 6%. So can they go after their dream of owning a home? So what we're trying to figure out is, does it make sense for them to own a home? So we are looking at itemized deductions, which we've talked about a Schedule A before. One more time. We've talked about a Schedule A before. Yeah. This is our Schedule A with really bad color for some reason. Let me see if I can fix this. No, it's not much better. I don't know what's up with the color. It's not my printout. My printout's just normal white. Yeah, that's not good though. We don't like that. That's true. Let's go this way. A little better. Okay, so this is your itemized deduction. So there's still a 2017 form. They haven't updated any forms, and it wouldn't surprise me if you're not going to see updated forms until maybe the end of November, December. But with all the changes that they're doing, it could easily be the first of the year before you see all the forms coming out. The 1040 will be the last one, because they're making the most changes to the 1040, and we've seen kind of what they're talking about doing to the 1040. They're not going to release a final 1040 until they're absolutely sure that they're not going to make any more changes to the 1040. So we're going to go through each of these sections. We got medical up here, taxes, interest, charity. We've already talked about casualty and loss. And then we have job expenses and miscellaneous deductions. All those form our itemized deductions, which we talked about back at the beginning of the semester, whether or not you take a standard deduction or itemized deductions. And one of the things this year is the standard deduction is so much higher that they expect and they want it to lower the number of people that are taking the itemized deductions. Why do they want it to lower the number of people taking itemized deductions? It's easier for them.
That's what they actually pay for itemized?
Well, what does it do? What does itemized deductions allow you to do?
Take it from your AGI, right?
Well, it takes you from your AGI. You lower your taxable income.
Right.
All right. Itemized deductions are available to those that can do it, where standard deductions is kind of what's left, right? Everybody gets a standard deduction. Mm-hmm. So in one way, they're bringing the standard deduction up so everybody has the ability to take the higher number. They're trying to level a playing field. Everybody can get this high number, not just if you own a home, not just if you're sick and old, not just if you drive a lot of miles. So they're evening the playing field. They're making it easier to look at returns. if everyone takes, or more people take standard deduction, there's less things to validate if you have to go out and do an audit. There's a lot of paperwork behind some of these. But the more paperwork behind these are the people that have really high itemized deductions. It's not my itemized deductions at $25,000 or $30,000 or $35,000. But the other thing behind this is it's a lot easier for those individuals who are not necessarily ethical to do things on itemized deductions. So if you're giving a higher standard deduction, less people will itemize. And it does level the playing field. There are very good positives with this. So this number down here at the very bottom then is going to be the number that we're shooting for. So we're going to go through each of these sections. So you definitely want to know how to look at it. Schedule A. Each section is on its own and you total it. If you're doing a tax form, you at least want to go through, and one of the mistakes I've seen in the past is I'll see mortgage interest here and I don't see a total here. That's a mistake. The IRS is not going to see $10,000 here and say, oh, they just forgot to put it here. You need to put the total in both places. 10,000, 10,000. Right? So if I see it here and you don't put it here, there's an error. Now the good thing for you is because we're using software for everything, your total doesn't add up either. When you used to do it by hand, I had a lot more mistakes like that. Now if you don't put it in one or the other, then you're going to have an error. All right, so let's go back over to here, or not there. Let's make sure I hit the right buttons. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to go through the various sections just like we have here. And then itemized deductions only provide a benefit above. So everyone gets $24,000 if they're married, right? So if you happen to have $25,000, then you're getting an extra $1,000. So it's only that goes above and beyond. So if we're looking at that big picture that they're talking about, Susan and them are going to be able to itemize for the first time because they own a home. The only way that they're going to be able to itemize is assuming that their mortgage and their interest are going to be able to itemize and take them above the standard deduction. A lot of times the first year people own a home, it's not enough. And now with the $24,000, if two people are married, it probably definitely won't be enough. So your mortgage plus your taxes, which we're going to talk about, and notice it says qualifying taxes, because taxes, including state, local, real estate, and property, cannot exceed $10,000. So that plus your mortgage and others need to exceed the $24,000. So let's start at the top. Medical expenses. Medical expenses are deductible to the extent that they exceed 7.5% this year, and then going forward it's going to be 10%. All right, it was 10%, and then it went down to 7.5%. Well, let me start over. It was 7.5% forever. Then it went up to 10%, and then last year it went down to 7.5% for those over 65, and then right before Christmas, or actually not even, it was after that, they lowered it to 7.5% for everybody, and the tax forms were all wrong. So we're in class, and everything's coming out with 7.5%, and I'm like, the tax form's wrong. And then I'm like, well, everything's wrong, and then I get an email that says, nope, it's 7.5% for everybody. They can just decide to change whenever they want to change. But right now, it's 7.5% for everybody. So what does that mean? All right, and this is how I explain it to people that come to me, because they're always like, I'm keeping track of my medical. Pick a flat, easy number. If you make $100,000, and the reason I take 100, not that people make 100, but assume they're married. They each make $50,000. $100,000, that means their medical bills have to exceed $7,500. And then they get to deduct whatever is over $7,500. And the reason I pick that is because then they don't have to do any math. So you look at them and you say, are you spending more than $7,500 in medical? Sometimes they say, we're close. Then you say, well, keep track. Other times they're like, yeah, we're not even close. I said, then stop keeping track. Yeah. All right, there's Jimmy. All right, and then they don't have to worry about it. Because a lot of times, this is just an overview of all the tax changes. A lot of times, people that have good insurance do not come close to that unless they have a really big illness or they have a hospital stay where they're paying the out-of-pocket 20% or something like that. So usually the individuals that go above the medical expense are elderly and lower income that do not have health insurance or do not have good health insurance. All right, but you can keep track of it because you never do know. All right, so here's an example. Amy only has $10,000 of AGI. So she only has to go above $1,500. So she had, her medical expenses were $1,500. So when you take 7.5 of 10,000, it's $750. So her medical expenses she can deduct is actually $750. So that's an example of, again, she's making lower amount of money. So therefore, she's able to deduct the expenses. Now, Amy also has to be able to itemize in order to take advantage of that. But she would be able to deduct the medical expenses. So what's included? Basically, anytime you go to a doctor, all right, anytime you go to a doctor for any type of cure, prevention, mitigating, diagnosis, cure, anything like that. Any prescriptions prescribed through a doctor, anytime you go to a hospital, any type of treatment through a licensed doctor, any type of insulin, all right? Not over-the-counter drugs. Yes. I am limiting you tonight, but yes, what? You need to let me go through the slides. What do you want to ask?
That was my question.
Okay. All right, the purpose of the function, it goes to the taxpayer, the spouse, and any dependent. So basically anybody in your house. All right. It does not include cosmetic surgery, non-prescription drug, or any other general health. So things like vitamins or anything like that. If your cosmetic surgery is deemed to be medically necessary, it is. So for example, I have a son that has had something like 8 surgeries on his jaw. He was born with I don't remember what it's called, like a cleft lip, I think, or something like that. And as he's 18 now, he's had his final surgery. But they had to do the surgeries over the span of his life because he was growing. Those are all deductible, all right, because they were medically necessary. They're not cosmetic to say, you know, he wanted bigger lips or he wanted his nose reduced. Those are not deductible, all right? And if it's a personal injury or any type of disfiguring disease, those are always deductible. They are deductible in the year paid. It does not matter. And I've actually got really ticked off, and we weren't that close, but they didn't know that. I got billed for something in June that happened in the past August. And it was a decent-sized bill, I thought. I mean, it was well over $250. And I called and I just reamed them. I said, do you know that last year I was really close to deducting my medical? And this could have put me over, and we weren't that close. But I was ticked. How are you that far off in billing somebody? And so that was my point. But if I would have been, that would have really ticked me off. They don't know how much money I make. They don't know what my medical were. You don't bill someone that late because I could have done nothing about that. All right, so this is just a big picture on medical. It talks about that their AGI was $200,000 and they received a tax benefit for unreimbursed medical. So if you have insurance and your insurance, like my eyeglasses, for example, I pay for them and they reimburse me. Everything else I have, dental and medical, they pay for. And then I pay for whatever the difference is. Eyeglasses and contacts, I pay for and they reimburse me. Right? Like I've told you guys all semester, you do not claim that if you're going to be reimbursed. Right? I know they're going to reimburse me $80. It does not matter how much my contacts cost. They're going to reimburse me $80. So don't claim more than that. All right, don't claim that. So their itemized deductions have to be more than $15,000 for those expenses. They actually incurred 17, so they get to deduct $2,000. They had a lot of medical expenses. Here's just kind of a list of those that are deductible and those that are non-deductible. All right. A couple things that people don't necessarily think about. Transportation for medical care. All right, my parents live in Bonne Terre. It's about an hour from here. They come up here to see several different doctors. That mileage is deductible. All right. Where they live, they do not have the doctors that they need to see, the cardiologist. They get to drive up here. Cost of alcohol and drug rehabilitation and any type of stop smoking is deductible. All right, those are for the better health benefit. Those are not just because you want to be a better you. They have benefits of those. And then weight loss deduction is also better. Non-deductible, some of these crack me up, but they have shown up, which is why they are now listed as not. So over-the-counter medicine, we talked about that. But like funeral and burial, it's not deductible anywhere, guys. That is not a deductible expense. Bottled water, I don't know where that showed up. Any type of maternity clothes, and then for the improvement of health, you cannot do weight reduction or spas or anything like that. So when you see the weight reduction, that is obesity. You have to be going through, like my mother-in-law is on a doctor plan. It's free to her. But if it wasn't, it would be a weight loss. Yeah.
So even if someone needs to lose weight to get in better health?
They would have to, if you go through your doctor. Yeah. Now, I think something like 60 to 70% of the United States is obese. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So most people could probably go to their doctor and go through a plan. But like my husband wants to lose 25 pounds. That wouldn't qualify to go through. My mother-in-law would. All right. I think Weight Watchers for a lot of people would qualify, just because the people that my mother-in-law would qualify to do that. She wouldn't ever do it, but she would qualify. That's why something like through Medicare, if you're on Medicare, there are so many gyms around the area and across the United States that have something called Silver Sneakers, and you can go to those gyms for free. They don't even charge. It's just directly through Medicare. Otherwise, it would be a tax write-off for some, because what is Medicare trying to do? Keep their senior citizens in shape so that they're not having some of these costs, right? Okay, now along that line, nursing home expenditures are deductible. Now, this is the key. You have to be in the nursing home because you can't be on your own. So we're not talking about, what's the step before the nursing home? Assisted living. We're not talking about assisted living. We're talking about the one that none of us want to be in. All right? Assisted living, some of us don't care, because you can go shopping, you can go out to eat, you can play whatever you want to do, and you have your own apartment. It's not the end of the world. Right. Quote. I've looked at them. Delmar Gardens isn't that bad. I took my mother-in-law there after she stayed with us for 3 weeks. We went and looked at one of those. So, but hey, I wanted her to look at it before I had to put her in it, right? But the nursing home where my grandma was, nobody wants to be in a nursing home. It's nobody's goal to say, I'm going to have to go in a nursing home. So it's being in it for medical reasons. It includes meals and lodging. It's because you really don't have another choice. All right? So if that's the reason, you have to be in it. And just for reference, I did my grandmother's taxes. Her nursing home costs were like $80,000. And it was no prize. She was down in Bonne Terre. She was not up here. So basically, all the money we took out of her retirement or whatever went towards a nursing home. And that's all she had was medical and 401k. And she got back something like 10 or 12. I mean, she got a lot of the money back. But you're in there for the whole reason of them taking care of you. So those costs are deductible. If you have special school expenditures, and this is because you have to be in a school for special needs. I did taxes for a friend that I used to work with at AT&T, and he had a daughter that they adopted, and she had special needs. You couldn't necessarily tell if you saw her, but she was not mainstreamed. So I can't remember the name of the school that she was in St. Louis, but it was not cheap. All right, they actually helped them out in the sense that they were able to show how much of the school was the special cost and how much of the school was just because it was a private school. So they separated the cost. So the part of that school that was because she needed special needs was deductible on their tax return as a medical expense. All right.
So she can't just be like a child needing extra help.
No, there was special. She needed extra. It was not the special school district,
right,
which is free. She was not. She was beyond the special school district.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Right, and and I don't know anything about school of the blind, so I don't want to talk. But assuming that's not free, then that cost for the school for the blind would be deductible.
I don't know if it's free, but it's still.
Yeah. But if let's
you're
assume you have to pay,
special things, yeah.
right, and or the same for hearing or anything else. That would all be. Hers was none of those. It was just additional beyond the special school district.
Does that include that new school, brain? It's for autistic kids, there's like an after-school program that's supposed to help them with socialization.
I don't think it's going to include any. I don't think it's going to include any after-school programs because after-school programs are not deductible because they're not deemed necessary. That would be if something like that was deemed necessary. That would be then written through the doctor as a
Like if
program.
you're a pediatrician, they really need this.
Then that would be something else, right? Yep. Now the cost of meals is going to be usually taken out of that. Just like I didn't mention this with the nursing home, my grandma's all the meals and all the lodging and all the medical was included, but she paid for cable, and then my mom had her hair done, whatever many times, and her nails done. I had to back that out every month of her bill. That was not tax deductible. Those were choices. She didn't need to have cable, she didn't have to have her hair done, and she didn't have to have her nails done. So I had to back those out. Here, the meals are usually not going to unless it is part and coupled in with the tuition, and you can't back it out. Okay, now what about a home? And I actually have a friend, and I don't make this stuff up. If I give you an example, I promise it's real. We have a friend that used to go to school in Melville, has a daughter my son's age, and she just had a muscle disorder. And I honestly can't tell you, they moved out of Melville into Lindbergh, and I can't tell you if she actually still has it or what happened. But the doctor said one of the best things for her, and this undiagnosed at the time, was swimming. And so one of the things that they recommended was a pool that she really needed to swim. The walking, the running, she couldn't do those exercises. So they moved into a house where they could put an indoor pool. Luckily, they had the finances for that. But some of the costs behind it was medically necessary that she have access to an indoor pool. So the capital expenditures around that, just the pool, not the moving, would have been deductible in the year in which it was done. Maintenance and stuff like that can be deductible also as they continue on. So, and that's kind of goes into this. So if you have to do something and stuff like that in order to keep it going, they are deductible. Now, if you have to remove things, so like you move into a house that has structural barriers, or you have to add, that are handicap, you can deduct those. So, if you have to go in and add ramps and that type of stuff, and you have to remove barriers, you can include that as well. And there's a house on Butler Hill I pass all the time, and they had to do some major overhaul to the front of the house in order to add some ramps. Right. And there's little things. I mean, a lot of times when you're not affected by disability, you don't really think. But my cousin, who's only a year older than me, she has rheumatoid arthritis severely, and sometimes she's perfectly fine. Other times she can't move her hands. They had to change all the door handles in their house to be the levers because she can't turn a handle. And I don't have that. I have Raynaud's, which is nothing the same, but I know exactly what you mean. When my hands get cold, I can't function with the tips of my fingers. And I'll go up and I can't turn anything. I still don't have levers on my thing, but at the same time, you don't think about those things. Everything in her house has to be where she can push or she'll get stuck. So I always joke with her when she's at my house. I'm like, if it acts up, you're going to get locked in a bedroom. Lucky she has a good spirit about it. All right, you can deduct the cost of your dependents. They don't need to meet any type of gross income test. And this is one thing that's different. You do not need to be claiming your dependent, a child, to claim the medical expenses. So, if you're divorced and the other parent gets the kid that year, but you're paying some of the medical expenses, you can deduct those medical expenses. A lot of the stuff we've talked about, you don't get it unless you're getting that dependent. You can claim medical expenses for the kid that's not your dependent that year.
This sounds like a very big she said.
Well,
This
I
is
mean,
not the other parent who is claiming the kid from claiming
but here's the
insurance.
But here's the difference. One parent usually carries insurance. That doesn't change. So a husband and wife get divorced. The husband carries the insurance, but it's the mom's year to get the kid as a dependent. The husband's going to have all the medical. No, regardless. The mom's not going to have the medical because it's on the husband's insurance. So he could have 10 grand of it, especially if there's a child with medical. He's going to have all the expenses. at least the premiums and all that. Even if they divide up the rest of it, he's going to have the premiums. He's going to have all that. So he needs to be able to deduct that. She can deduct what he has, but he's still going to have stuff. And we hope, even though that's not the case, that people get along, right? But here's the thing, and we're going to see this in a few slides. It comes down to the taxpayer to prove this. So when you have alternating and you're claiming expenses for a non-dependent, you better be able to prove it. And medical is, huh?
Like, you know, the
Right, and medical is very easy to prove. It's not like charitable deductions. Well, I took $4,000 worth of stuff to Goodwill. You know, that's a little easier to buff if you really wanted to. How do they know what you gave, right? This is not. If you have medical expenses outside of mileage, but you can prove where you live and you can prove where the doctor is, right? You're gonna have spent money. So it's not really a he said, she said. Somebody spent the money.
How do you estimate what you sent to Goodwill?
We're gonna talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
That was a Katie question. Okay, transportation for medical, I mentioned already, it's 18 cents a mile. So it's not like our other mileage, which was 53.5 cents. It's not as high. Actually, it's 54.5. The college pays 53. You know, we're 1 cent lower. So technically, I could deduct that other penny if I wanted to. So it's 18 cents for medical. It is lower, and actually, when we talk about charity, it's 14 cents. So you don't get the full-fledged of working mileage, but you do get an advantage of some mileage. All right, it's the actual out-of-pocket, and you also get a hotel allowance. Notice it's $50 a night per person. So in the event that the husband and wife both, so for example, a child, the husband and wife both go, they each get $50. So you can actually stay at a $100 a night hotel, all right? And that's why you see these ads for like Ronald McDonald House or St. Jude's where there's no cost that goes on. That's why some of those are so important because, yeah, you get this $50 a night back, but $50 a night for most of you guys, if you've checked a hotel lately, that ain't covering it. Okay, I stayed at a Super 8 in Oskaloosa, Iowa when I moved my son in, and let me tell you, there was nothing super about that hotel, and I won't stay there again, and it was 110. We stayed 25 minutes away the next time we went up because I'm not staying in that hotel again. And it was $110. I'm like, are you kidding me? This should be like $35.99 a night, and I'm in Oskaloosa, Iowa. I'm not like in St. Louis paying $110 a night for a Super 8. It was horrible. And every room was smoking. It wasn't even a non-smoking room. And my husband's like, we're never coming back here, are we? And my boys were like, Mom's never coming back to this hotel again. And I'm like, no. When you're the only girl, you do get to make some decisions, right? So, the parent or aide, if they need to accompany. Now, obviously, a parent or aide usually needs to accompany, so that one's easy. All right, so here's an example. John and his mother, John's mother moves in with him. They advise that she needs to see a specialist for a heart condition. So they flew to Cleveland. Now my friend whose daughter had the muscle disorder that put the pool in, they spent a week at the Mayo Clinic in Cleveland. All right, so they had to fly to Cleveland to do that. So you fly to Cleveland, it was $250 each. They must have flew Southwest. All right, they had 2 nights of lodging at $120 each. What can they deduct? 100% of the transportation, and then they get $50 per night per person. So of the $480, they get $200. So they get a break, but notice they got less than half of the lodging. Yes.
So when someone's needs to see a specialist, I'm assuming that if there's a specialist in your city, that you decide you want to go to another.
It depends on what it is. Obviously, usually if you're seeing a doctor in your city, we're in a big city, so we have a lot of advantages. I'm sure one of the reasons they went to the Mayo Clinic there is they've exhausted their specialists here. If your doctor here suggests that you go see a specialist somewhere else, that's your reason.
Okay, so as long as it was.
If your doctor sends you, you're good. Yeah.
So this is $50 per night per person.
Right.
So I know, like, say it was a kid.
Right.
They need to go, so obviously the parent need to go. But what if they had an infant as well?
I think the infant would not count as needing the $50 because the hotel's not going to charge for the infant.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would just be a tag along. Right. And they're not going to typically pay for kids to go. So like, let's say my 13-year-old needed to go. My husband and I both went. The 16-year-old might go, but we're not getting $50 for him to go. So they're not going to pay for his airfare either. So the infant probably wouldn't need a seat on the plane. Now, if you start getting into a toddler situation, you're probably going to be pushing the buttons on whether mom and dad both should be going. They're probably going to be like, dad needs to stay home, mom goes, sorry, dad's mom usually goes in that situation. Mom goes, dad stays home with the other kid. Would
So
probably,
even if you have more kids, how can they not?
right, yeah. The only way you could probably get away with that is if it's more of a life or death situation, yeah.
Because
And then you
say
wouldn't care.
You have to take care of your kid anyway.
Right, yeah. Now, if you're a single mom or single dad, then you could probably be like, everybody had to go. Yeah. All right,
One last question, I swear. So what if,
I'm not believing that.
I know, you're not.
Okay.
Let's say Martha was originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay,
So the reason they're going to Cleveland is not because that they were recommended to see the
No,
specialist, but that's
can't
because that was
deduct
their doctor.
no.
Okay.
Martha's going because Martha wants to, then Martha's up a creek.
Because like I've been up against.
If I was
like,
Martha, and I'm not saying this on this recording, but if I was Martha, I would get a doctor to recommend me. See, what Cleveland has is Cleveland has a Mayo Clinic. That's why they're using
also,
this
like,
example.
I have an uncle. He has a really bad heart condition, like quadruple bypass,
Right.
lots of stuff. His doctor's in St. Louis. He almost never lives in St. Louis anymore, and he spends.
But he'd fly
in
back.
Florida, and he spends summers in Michigan, and every time he has to go to the doctor, they fly in. Of course, granted, these are people with a private jet. They don't need to be deducting this. They can afford it.
Right.
But
He could probably deduct coming here to see the doctor because he's always seen this doctor.
because there's doctors in Florida. I'm
Right.
sure there's.
But if his doctor's here, he could probably deduct that doctor. But just to go see a doctor. No.
Because that was the doctor that performed the surgery and everything.
Right. My aunt comes up here because she sees a throat doctor because she loses her voice. She has to get throat shots every 6 months. All right. Premiums paid for medical insurance are deductible. So those wonderful, if you have health insurance and you pay those wonderful anywhere from $200 to $600 whatever dollars a month, those are deductible. However, if you have them taken out of your paycheck, they already are tax-free. So that you can't deduct them twice. And we have had people in VITA who have been like, well, what about my insurance premiums? And you're like, okay, do you pay them? Yeah. How do you pay them? Well, they take them out of my paycheck. Well, then you're already getting them tax-free. That is the best way to do it because that's tax-free versus tax deductible. Tax-free is always the best way to go. Here you're getting a tax break. When they come out of your paycheck, you're not paying any taxes at all. So that is the best way to do it. Anytime you can have something taken out of your paycheck first, that's the way you want to do it. So that's why the health savings accounts are so much better taken out of your paycheck. I have the health money coming out that we use for prescriptions and braces because that is tax-free, and we don't ever get to deduct medical. So I try to do as much as I can without losing money in the health savings. So that's what the next thing says. Do not to double deduct. And they will know because it's on your W-2. Now, self-employed people get to deduct 100% of their premiums. And it goes for AGI. That's the difference. On the front page of your 1040, in that little bitty section at the bottom, it says self-employed insurance premiums. 100% is deductible. So it doesn't go on your Schedule A. So that is one benefit that you get if you're self-employed, because you're paying 100%. You're not paying $200 to $600 to whatever a month. You're paying a lot more, and you're probably not getting near as good as insurance. All right, it includes the amount that you pay for you, your spouse, and your dependents. If the taxpayer is not eligible to participate in a subsidized health plan maintained by anybody else. That's the key. So I do know people that are self-employed who work for a company. So 2 jobs. If you are offered health care at the company and you decline it, you can't do this.
So only work part-time.
Yeah. You have to, if you are eligible to take health care through a company, then you cannot deduct in full your self-employed health insurance. All right. Premiums for qualified long-term care insurance are also deducted as medical. Not everybody takes these. This is if you are paying for insurance for you if you end up in a nursing home. Not everybody does this. I don't have this. All right, this is something that is additional that sometimes people do. All right, so it's completely different based on what everybody else has. I was just looking at my question. Okay. So return to the facts. John is a sole practitioner in an unincorporated county. During the year, he paid health insurance premiums of $12,000 on his own and $8,000 for his wife, Susan. He actually can deduct $20,000. That is huge. Think about that. I mean, he's looking at almost what?
That's almost like
$1,500 a month that he's paying in premiums. Or actually, it's more than that, isn't it? It's a lot. So that's why now it's only deducting. He's only reducing his taxable income. It's not like he's getting that money back, but it is still a big deduction. Now, reimbursement. What happens if we get reimbursed? All right. If you're reimbursed in the same year, so meaning you incurred the medical expense and you got reimbursed, kind of like I was talking about with my glasses, right? I haven't been reimbursed yet, but I'm expecting to be reimbursed anytime soon. Then you offset it. My contacts cost $200, they reimbursed me $80. I could claim $120. All right. If you're reimbursed in the next year, what's going to happen? If I was dumb and I deducted $200 included in my medical, $200 of contacts, and then next year they gave me $80 back, what would I have to do?
Add it to your agent.
Okay, now do we know how much? Because I've never gone into this detail. I always just tell you guys you have to add it back, but how
It
much?
would have to be what you paid plus what they gave you back.
No, it's not that hard. Okay, so first of all, the first question you ask the person is, if you say, did you get reimbursed? And they say yes, first question you ask them is, did you itemize? Because a lot of times they'll tell you, well, you know, I was going to take this deduction and I got reimbursed. Well, look at them and be like, did you actually end up itemizing? No. Well, then it doesn't matter. All right? If they end up taking standard deduction, it doesn't matter if they got reimbursed. Right? If they did itemize, then you have to add back what they benefited from it. Not what they not my 120 that I, you know, that they reimbursed that I could have taken, but what they benefited. So, for example, I had medical expenses of $4,200. The company reimbursed me $800. All right. So if they reimbursed me in the same year, that's easy. I take $3,400. We already said that, and take 7.5% of AGI. Now, same example, but now they reimbursed me $800 in 2019. So in 2018, I would have got $4,200 minus 7.5% of AGI. Then in 2019, the reimbursement is income to the extent that I received a benefit from the expense in 2018. So, if I got a full $800, then I'd have to add $800 back. But if I only benefited $400, so like if once I took AGI into effect, if I only got a benefit of $400, then I'd only add $400 back. You don't have to add back more than you actually benefited. So if I only ended up with $4,000 here, that means my benefit was $200. Then I'd only add back $200. So you don't just add back what you benefit, the $800. You got to make sure you actually got $800 worth of benefit. Does that make sense?
You only add back as much as you actually
Benefit.
reduced.
Your taxable income. Yep, you got it. Okay, so let's look at a problem.